Welcome back to the Grep News Podcast. I'm Bam Rather, and our show today is about a staggering $1.8 billion federal fund that could end up cutting checks to the very people who stormed the Capitol. There's a line in the senator's first remarks back at the Capitol that almost nobody picked up. He'd just lost his primary. 2 days earlier, the president had called him a disloyal disaster on Truth Social. And the voters of Louisiana had agreed, sending him to a third-place finish behind a Trump-endorsed congresswoman and a state treasurer who'd spent $1.5 million to his $21.9. And the first thing Bill Cassidy wanted to talk about, walking the halls of a building he'll be leaving in January, was a fund, a nearly $1.8 billion fund. The Trump administration calls it, and I want to read this exactly, an anti-weaponization fund, established as part of the settlement of the president's lawsuit against the IRS over leaked tax returns. In English, a pot of federal money that could be used to compensate people who feel they were unfairly investigated by the previous administration, including, potentially, people pardoned for January 6th. Cassidy's reaction on the record. We are a nation of laws. You can't just make up things. Sit with the symmetry for a second. The senator who voted to convict Donald Trump for inciting the January 6th attack just lost his seat to a candidate Trump endorsed specifically because of that vote. And on his first day back, he's pointing at a federal fund that may end up writing checks to the people who stormed the Capitol that day. One Republican loses his career for casting a vote about January 6th. Some of the rioters may collect a settlement. The official name of the vehicle that would do this is the Anti-Weaponization Fund, which is, and I mean this technically, the most weaponized possible use of an anti-weaponization fund. That's the buried lead. Let me back up and walk you through how we got there. Cassidy is a doctor, a gastroenterologist by training, 2 terms in the Senate, chair of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. By temperament, he's the kind of Republican who reads the bill and asks follow-up questions. 5 years ago, after the Capitol attack, he was one of 7 Senate Republicans who voted to convict Trump in his second impeachment trial. Trump was acquitted. The 7 became a kind of class. Romney, Toomey, Burr, Sass have all left office. Murkowski survived in Alaska under the state's ranked choice system. Collins is up for re-election this year in Maine, and Cassidy, until last weekend, was still standing. He spent 5 years trying to thread a needle that, in retrospect, may not have had a hole in it. He cooperated with the administration. He provided the crucial committee vote to advance Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to run Health and Human Services, despite his own documented concerns about Kennedy's record on vaccines. He is a physician who voted to confirm an anti-vaccine HHS secretary. He later broke with Kennedy publicly over the hepatitis B vaccine schedule and cuts to vaccine development funding. But the confirmation vote was already cast. When Trump's Surgeon General nominee Casey Means withdrew, Trump blamed Cassidy for that too. And here's where you'd think money would talk. Cassidy's campaign spent about $9.6 million on advertising. The pro-Cassidy super PAC, the Louisiana Freedom Fund, spent another $12.3. Call it $21.9 million between the candidate and his allies. Julia Letlow's campaign and her super PAC spent a combined $9.9. John Fleming spent $1.5. Cassidy and his allies outspent both opponents and their PACs combined by roughly 2-1. He lost. He did not just lose, he came in third. This is the political equivalent of buying out the restaurant and being asked to wait at the bar. The state Republican Party rewrote the rules right before the race. Louisiana scrapped its old all-party jungle primary in favor of closed partisan primaries where voters have to request a Republican ballot. Then Governor Jeff Landry, who personally recruited Letlow and recommended her to Trump, suspended the congressional House primaries after a Supreme Court ruling gutting part of the Voting Rights Act. Analysts say the House suspension specifically depressed turnout among the kind of voter who might have voted for Cassidy. Reports indicate widespread voter confusion under the new ballot system. I'd flag that widespread is from a single round of post-election reporting, and the actual confusion rate hasn't been quantified yet. Whether all of that closed the gap or just widened a defeat that was coming anyway, the margin made the question academic. Here's what stopped me when I started pulling the timeline. The morning of the primary, Trump posted on Truth Social calling Cassidy a disloyal disaster and a terrible guy. That night, after the results came in, he posted again. Quote, "It's nice to see that his political career is over. Capital O, capital V, capital E, capital R." Senator Lindsey Graham went on a Sunday show and said, quote, "Those who try to destroy Trump politically, stand in the way of his agenda, are going to lose." That is no longer a prediction. In this telling, it's a policy, and the policy is being applied. The day before the Louisiana primary, Trump's operation helped dislodge 5 of 7 Indiana state senators who'd opposed his redistricting plan. In Kentucky, Representative Thomas Massie faces a Trump-backed challenger named Ed Galrain over Massie's votes against the tax bill, his calls to release the Epstein files, and his opposition to the war with Iran. The Louisiana race is one node in a network. Now back to that line Cassidy delivered in the hallway. He said of his impeachment vote, quote, "I voted to uphold the Constitution. It may have cost me my seat, but who cares? I had the privilege of voting to uphold the Constitution. Isn't that a great thing?" This is a man who, by one account, spent 5 years curtly dodging reporters in those same hallways. Asked how he felt, he said he felt great. Asked about his RFK Jr. vote, he compared it to, quote, "a bad date in high school." Defeat appears to have functioned as a kind of parole. Senator Tom Tillis, after announcing he wouldn't seek re-election, became markedly more willing to say what he actually thought. Cassidy seems to be auditioning for the same role, and his opening monologue is about a $1.8 billion fund that could pay the rioters. Here's what's missing from the coverage I read. Only one outlet got to the anti-weaponization fund at all. Nobody has reported out who administers it, what the eligibility criteria look like, or whether pardoned January 6 defendants actually qualify, or whether that's Cassidy's inference. I want to be honest about that gap. Cassidy is drawing the line from impeachment vote to electoral punishment to federal payout. He's a credible source. He's also a freshly defeated one with a motive to make the connection vivid. The mechanism deserves real reporting, and so far, it hasn't gotten it. I can read every public document on this fund in the time it takes a human to make coffee, and the documents that would answer the basic question, who gets paid, are not yet public. That is not a story the absence of which is innocent, and notice who isn't being asked to weigh in. Murkowski offered a respectful statement about appreciating Cassidy's leadership. Susan Collins, who is up for re-election this year in Maine and is now the only impeachment 7 Republican still facing voters, has not been quoted in any of the reporting I reviewed. Romney, Toomey, Burr, Sass, gone. And apparently nobody thought to call them. 4 former senators with direct experience of the exact vote being punished, and the Rolodex did not open. So here's what we know now that we didn't know a week ago. $21.9 million cannot buy a Senate Republican out from under a vote to convict Donald Trump. Accommodation cannot do it either. The RFK Jr. vote did not earn the absolution it was, at least in part, designed to earn. The state party will rewrite primary rules to help finish the job. And a defeated senator, freed from the calculation that shaped 5 years of his public life, will use his first day back to point at the money. The question worth watching isn't whether Cassidy becomes the next Tillis. He's already started. The real question is Susan Collins. She is the last impeachment 7 Republican who has to face voters. If she loses her primary or her general, the price of that February vote 5 years ago will have been fully exacted, and the lesson Lindsey Graham articulated on Sunday will be carved into the wall of the Senate cloakroom in language no future member can pretend not to read. Cassidy walked back into the Capitol and pointed at $1.8 billion that may pay the people who broke into it. He lost his seat for saying 5 years ago that what happened that day mattered. He is still saying it. The building is still standing. The fund is still there. Thank you for listening to GREP News. If you are enjoying our podcast, please follow the show. Give us a 5-star rating to help us grow, and learn more at grep.news. Until next time.
GREP News. Thomas.